Key Modern Railways. In-depth railway news.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Railways preview for the July 2021 edition. Yes, I'm in the studio again, but we do have some outside broadcasts for you. You can tell the weather's getting better. Of course, the big story this month is the Williams-Shapps report. But don't worry, there's lots of other things too, including the almost traditional Great Western feature to read in your deck chair on Dawlish Beach. Well, you could do a lot worse. So, first off, it's over to the editor on the loo. I'm sorry, the editor on the loo branch. Okay, Philip, over to you.
Thanks Ian, and hello everyone. So, a different location for me this time. You'll hopefully just have seen in the very background the train departing. I'm on the Loo branch in Cornwall. This is Coombe Junction, and Coombe Junction Halt is one of the least used stations in the country. And for those of you who know the branch, it was effectively built in two halves. The bits along the valley from Loo through to here was built first, and then a long loop to connect with the main line up at Liskeard was built on a very steep gradient. So trains come down from Liskeard and then perform a reversal here. Coombe Junction Station is actually a little bit that way. The train that I've just filmed behind me didn't actually go into the station, as only a couple of trains a day do that. It's one of the very least used stations in the country. And Loo branch is also interesting because it's got two stations which have the word Halt in the name. It's got Coombe Junction Halt and St Keen Wishingwell Halt. Why the potted history of the Western? Well, I've been down here for a couple of days for a short break, but also our July issue of Modern Railways has a focus on the Great Western. And we have 4 features within that issue. None of them are actually about Cornwall specifically, but we do have an overview of developments at Great Western Railway with GWRMD Mark Copwood, and that covers a lot of detail. Obviously, we're continuing to report on the issues with the Hitachi trains, but we've got some thoughts about longer term projects, including forthcoming Class 769s around the North Downs line and the Thames Valley, the future of the Night Riviera sleeper, developments in the West Country with plans for service enhancements and so on. So there's a great deal of ground to cover. Second feature is about Bristol. This summer is a particularly important one in the city of Bristol on the railways. We've got Bristol East Junction remodelling, which starts on the 10th of July and runs through for 8 weeks. And that's a very significant project on to the east of Temple Mead Station, where there'll be various closures. So we report on why that work's happening, how it's going to be managed through there, the various phases of the operation, and what's going to be achieved through it. There's various enhancements planned, some new stations and enhancements to services through the Metro West project. Then back towards the end of May, we had a recent funding announcement about improvements at Oxford Station, and this is the Oxford Station Phase 2 project, which is split into 4 different phases. And my colleague James Abbott, who's a graduate of the university, so has an affection for the City of Dreaming Spires, he's done that feature, reporting about those 4 phases and what they mean and what the prospects are. And the good news for all of us at Modern Railways is the visuals had electrification in, so we do hope that that's going to reach Oxford soon. And then the last feature from my West Country-based colleague Andy Roden is about the resilience works on the seawall at Dawlish. This is something we've reported on before, but he's been to visit the latest phase of works, which is covering the area through Dawlish Station. So it's a very interesting update with some of the technical challenges that the project team have faced there. So there's lots going on the Western. We do a Western issue every year, but there is always lots to talk about, and that's very much the case nowadays as well. Other than that, a few other features of note. We have our report on the Golden Whistles, which we've held virtually, and reporting on the winners of the awards calculated by statistics for best on-time performance and so on. And we also have a write-up of the presentation Andrew Haynes gave in a webinar at the end of May. He talks about operations in a post-COVID world, and he used the 7 promises in the Williams-Shapps review as his framework. And I think that's a very interesting reflection on some of the things the railway is doing and needs to do. in response to William Shapps. Speaking of which, Roger and Ian have both written about it, but so have lots of our other correspondents. We have news coverage as well, so there's very comprehensive coverage, and it's fascinating to see what all the different correspondents think of various aspects of the plan and what struck them. So, and we have a guest editorial as well from Graham Cross of SLC Investments, who used to work at Chiltern Railways and Heathrow Southern Railway, who's provided a very interesting perspective on the pros and cons of the plan. Roger and Ian will of course tell you more about their bits in their separate segments of this video. And then we also have a short feature about battery potential on trains with Hitachi ABB power grids, and which again my colleague Andy Roden has done, and that's an interesting look at how they're trying to utilise that technology with recharging batteries from overhead wires. And it's quite apt actually that the West Country, the route west of Exeter, with a GWR 802 fitted with batteries as a trial, is going to be one of the early uses for that technology. And I can't leave this without forgetting that we have a supplement in this issue as well, and the supplement is largely focusing on the work of women in rail, but focusing on diversity as a whole, which is an issue that the rail industry needs to tackle. So we hope that working with women in rail, we've produced a really interesting and convincing prospectus about what needs to be done. There has been a good deal achieved already, but there is still more to do in that area. So a packed issue as ever, lots for me to talk about, but I've overdone my time, so I better hand back to Ian, and I will say farewell from down here in southeast Cornwall in the upper echelons of the Lou Valley. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. From what I've seen of women in rail, they don't need much help, but it's an interesting supplement. Onward now to our crack engineer, Roger Ford, and you'll be pleased to know there is much more to talk about this month other than cracks. Here he is checking his oranges for Del Monte beside the East Coast main line. Roger, that's East Coast. Roger.
Well, hello again. That was a real train rather than a virtual background, and I'm filming beside the West Coast main line in sunny Welwyn Garden City. This month's Informed Sources covers a wide range of subjects. I start off with a statement in last month's Modern Railways concerning the future of diesel traction, where the head of Porterbrook Leasing said that it was impossible or impractical to have all diesels out of service by 2040. So I look at the options and revisit the claims for the hydrogen fuel cells, which of course, until you get pure green hydrogen, are going to put out pretty well as much CO2 as a diesel. I also look at the options for keeping the diesel carbon neutral, if not carbon zero, and that includes an initiative in Sweden where Norsk e-fuels are planning to produce a synthetic diesel fuel. From that I return to last month's mega subject, which of course was the cracking of yaw damper attachments to trains, and of course in the case of the Hitachi 800 series, the mysterious cracking of the jacking points. I got that slightly wrong last month, and I thought it was the pocket into which the jacking arm goes, but in fact it's the aluminium pad the train rests on when it's being lifted. It looks as though Hitachi have found out what to do about the jacking pad, but the yaw damper brackets seem to be something of a mystery. They've got an instrumented train out running, and so we'll have to wait and see what happens on that one. Meanwhile, CAF, of course, who had similar problems, have... I'll wait for a train, it's nice to be interrupted. CAF have had similar problems with their yaw damper bracket attachments, and what they've done is they've found a solution which is a straightforward steel plate bolted under the train, and then you bolt the yaw damper arm to that. Finally, I move on to what everybody's talking about, which is the Williams-Shapps plan. We've got extensive coverage of all features of the plan in this month's Modern Railways, but what I've looked at in particular is the issue of organisation and management, how the railway is going to be run. One of the claims of the plan is it aims to reduce fragmentation, and I look at what they're proposing, particularly with more small, innovative operators of concessions, and I conclude that it looks as though the more fragmentation rather than less, and the track and train are still separated. Finally, there's an update, changing point on new train TinWatch, where we move from MTIN, the miles per technical incident, to the new one based on a formal list of failures, which widens the scope. The problem there is that we're going to change over this month, and I've managed to get both the MTIN and the new 710D figures together so you can compare them. So that's all for this month, and I'll go on to enjoy the sunshine. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. You go and enjoy the sunshine. Although sadly I can't. My last trip out was to Doncaster to look at the Swift Class 321 parcels conversion. And sure enough, I write about that in my column. There is only so much you can say about taking seats out and putting a checker plate floor down, but the potential is there for a lot of business. At that visit, there were more women than men showing me around, which is fine. What wasn't fine was that one of the party had COVID, so I got pinged on my NHS app and got grounded for 2 weeks. I had hoped to take my first trip on a Class 769, but 2 of my superannuated anoraks had to go without me. Luckily, they managed to catch one of the 2 in service out of the 9 down there. The day before one had been towed home by a rescue loco. They were stopping at Bargoed and leaving a difficult bit onto Rumney for Class 153s, but at least they kept time. I should hope so too, since they were virtually empty and had very short dwell times due to the lack of passengers. I hope they last long enough to do some crush-laden runs with the heating on. When I don't believe they will keep time, but we'll see. You may recall I have doubted the wisdom of this project pretty much since it started. Still, that's not in a magazine. What is, on to Pan Up. Now, I'm getting jealous of these chaps out in the sunshine, but as I said, I've been pinged, so I'm stuck here. But never mind. Thanks to the wonderful work of the Modern Railways CGI division, I can bring you an outside broadcast from the only place in Scotland that is not up for electrification. Lockdown. It's just over here. I'll just get me Bradshaws and I'll be right there. Well, here we are then in the rather little known place of Lockdown in Scotland. And of course, I know it doesn't look like Scotland because it's not electrified, but there you go, you can't win them all. Apparently it's not on the map, so Bill Reeve may have missed it. It says here, Lockdown is an interesting place, slightly behind the times, but very useful if you can't go out the house. So, here we are then, onto my Pan Up column. The way some commentators are going on, you would think that what we've got now was a superb, world-class way of organising railways. Well, we all know it isn't, at least not for the taxpayer or the fare payer. And I'm looking more at the spirit of the report to look to the future. Yes, not much changes at the moment, but it will. And yes, there isn't much detail. By the way, haven't we spent the last 20 odd years saying that the government shouldn't do detail? And then we complain when they don't do detail. For goodness sake! Well, if you haven't read the report, and I wouldn't blame you, you will have missed all the good stuff that's in there, in between all the whinging. So, you want something radical? Innovative? Try this from the report, and I quote, "New trains should be more comfortable than the ones they replace." Amazing. So go ahead and make it so. So bye-bye, see you next time. And maybe I'll go out into the real world then. Bye all.
Visit www.keymodernrailways.com for more interesting and essential information about the British Railway Network.